I do not own the rights to this music. I don't own the rights to this music.
I woke up early today, opened my eyes, only to see the sun shining down on me. I can hear the birds outside my windows chirping and singing songs and flying free. I turn my radio on and I hear my favorite song play. The beside me and I can only pray this mood won't change. Come with us and you'll see something that you've never seen before. How it felt if you take flight and reach my altitude. I'll be beneath the floor.
Per usual, we're going to wait for a few more people to come into the room.
Fasten your seatbelts and turn on your flight mode, 'cause we're going up. Surfing the galaxies, I hold them my nose on blades, staring at stars while they smile at us. On my way to work, I see the same faces that pass me each and every day. The man them selling CDs, the smokers, the mums and the beggars just waving to them getting on with their lives. I doubt they even have time to say or notice the beauty that is, 'cause the duties exist from.
Hello, Facebook. It's good to see you this evening. I'm going to wait for a few more people to come into the room. How you doing, Devonna? Ignore my comment. I read your name wrong. I thought you were someone else, so please ignore my response. I thought you were one of my professors, so I don't know that I know how to delete that comment, but that's okay. Happy Thursday evening. It is Friday Eve, and I hope everybody had a wonderful week. So I'm going to give it just a few more seconds to let some people come into the room and see if I can adjust my screen so that I can see my comments. I can't ever hardly see my comments the way I want to. And in fact, I know it's user error, but that's beside the point. I'm going to get this together one day. All right, Facebook, well, we're just going to go ahead and jump right into it. I am back with part 4 of how a hot girl's summer turned really, really cold. As I've said all week, in recognition of Lupus Awareness Month, and I forgot to mention that it was also just Women's Health Month, which is the month of May. I am telling my story in a 6-part series that may actually turn into a 7-part series depending on how much I get through each day. I've actually been running about 20 minutes or so, and that's kind of including, a minute or two in the beginning with the music and waiting for people to get in. I want people to come back the next day, and I try not to talk too long. I want to mention that I'm raising money for the Lupus Foundation of America, which is a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to improving the quality of life for all people affected by lupus. So if you feel so moved to donate, please do. If you didn't catch my videos Monday through Wednesday of this week, the last full week of May, I've been sharing how in the summer of 1998, when I was very much a hot girl and thought that I was going to have the best time enjoying summertime Chicago, but instead I was hanging out in emergency rooms between Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and Chicago, and I spent a total of 33 days hospitalized, of which 14 of those days I was on the critical care unit, and I had to have 2 different heart surgeries accompanied by a collapsed lung, and I went from hot to knot in record time. Can I be real and tell y'all something? These last 3 days sharing my story have been pretty rough for me. My hope is that somebody is tuning in and is listening that really needs to hear my story and that my story reaches and helps someone. I hope this is a judgment free zone, but tonight I had to bring reinforcements um, to finish this up. To help me finish, I needed wine to finish. I have not ever really recounted this story, and y'all have to remember this has been nearly 23 years. It'll be 23 years come July. So, the name of this wine, it is a red blend and it is called Storyteller. And it was actually in my little wine thing downstairs. I wasn't even really looking for it on purpose. But trust me, while I had to bring reinforcements, don't judge me. And even if you do, that's okay. I won't care. At the end of this, we gonna turn this whole thing around. Just as sure as I sit in front of you, there is hope and there is a lot of stories, a lot of lessons that come out of this, not just for me over the years, but for someone else as well. So where did I leave off yesterday? So I think I left off with being checked into the hospital. I was checked into the hospital in Harvey, Illinois, which is in the south suburbs of Chicago. I was in Ingalls Hospital. They had come to determine that I was very much a hot girl. I was inflamed from head to toe. I had inflamed lung sacs with fluid, and I had an inflamed heart sac that was also filled with fluid. Basically, my body was in total crisis due to the lupus that I didn't even know I had. So, at this time, lupus wasn't in the picture, a diagnosis wasn't in the picture. This is pretty much day one, of me being checked into the hospital. So, my body basically had no defenses. My immune system was completely shot and it was compromised. So, as I said before, when you are young, and when you come into the hospital and doctors have no idea what's wrong with you, they will treat you like you are a walking pandemic. The doctors withheld medication from me as not to mask whatever was truly going on with me. They didn't want to give me Tylenol. They didn't want to mask a fever if my body was going to spike a fever. They didn't want to give me a steroid because they didn't want to mask anything that was going on. And my bones were hurting. That was just how much pain I was in. I never thought that I could ever be in that much pain again until I had a baby, but that was a whole different thing because I was in induced labor, which is not natural, and that's just a whole other ball game. Another thing that was going on with me, which is, my whole life, is that, I am a phlebotomist's nightmare or a dream. I have no working veins. So when it comes to drawing blood and finding a vein, not just to draw blood from, but I had to be on an IV. So they have to find a vein that's able to sustain fluid, not just to draw blood from, like when you go and get your blood drawn for whatever reason. But when you're on an IV, if they need to administer emergency medication, they need a sustainable vein that they could push fluid. Not they can draw blood from it and they could push fluid through it. Well, every vein I had, probably after a couple of hours, it blew. My veins blew. So I probably had up and down my arm, both arms, where my veins were blowing. I had bruises probably about, I don't know, about an inch in diameter because they could not find a sustainable vein. And I was having blood draws done every couple of hours because they were trying to take blood as often as they could to see if my blood turned positive for anything. I mean, let's just be real. They could have told me if I had HIV within 24 to 48 hours, even back then. So any of the normal things that they would test a young person for, any STD, including HIV, including a lot of other things that they would test my blood for, I was coming up negative for everything. And so I was having blood draw after blood draw blown vein, one blown vein after the next, after the next, after the next. And this was over the course of days had gone by. So I might be on day 5 and I'm still in the hospital. I'm still in an incredible amount of pain. I have 5 doctors on my case, and not one single doctor is able to tell me anything, anything about what's happening to me. And, I had to beg them to give me something just for a headache I had. I was trying to get my parents to smuggle in medicine just so that I wouldn't have to have the doctor administer it to me because they wouldn't give it to me. So, um, after about the 15th vein that I had to blow, and I still, knowing what I know now, I still don't know why they just didn't, give me a port. But they didn't. And I'm in day 5 in the hospital. They actually, they put a vein, they put a line in my knuckle. I mean, this is where we are with how um, poorly my veins are. So they can't get a viable vein that will sustain fluid and that will sustain blood draw. So they actually put one in between my knuckles. And that thing was in my hand. And, for probably about a day and a half, and I knocked my hand around and it got infected. I'm convinced that it got infected. So, over the course of a day or two, my condition just seemed to worsen. I was kind of in and out of consciousness. I wasn't as active as I was. I really wasn't as talkative, and I had a fever like none other. So, but let me back that up a little bit. So after they put that IV in my hand, I noticed that the doctor hung a bag of antibiotic. Now, mind you, up until that point, they hadn't given me anything for my condition. So, anytime they give you an antibiotic, I knew that I had an infection. And I'm going to tell you how and why I knew this. So, I was a graduate student. I was getting my master's degree in business administration with a concentration in finance. However, prior to that, I had worked as a pharmaceutical sales representative for Pfizer. And when I worked for Pfizer on an extended internship, I actually used to sell Zithromax, which is an antibiotic. I used to sell Z-Paks. I used to sell a blood pressure medication. I sold Zyrtec when it was brand spanking new. So when you're a sales rep, we had to do 3 months of training. I mean, I had to take all of the pharmacokinetic training. I knew about these medicines. I knew about the antibiotics. I knew about how they worked. I knew about what they treated. I knew all that stuff. Most people don't know that pharmacists actually get to override a doctor's prescription because it's the pharmacist that knows about the chemical reactions in medicines. It is not the doctor. So when he hung a bag of antibiotic, it was a bag of nafcillin. I didn't say anything the first day. And that's a whole other tangent that I can go on about the experience of being an informed patient, a very vocal, educated, and informed patient as opposed to not being one, or the average patient that might come into the hospital and have a similar experience or a worse experience, and they're not even as half as informed and or educated as I am and able to be an advocate for myself. So I didn't say anything the first day he hung the bag of antibiotic. But you hang an antibiotic, why? Because there's an infection going on somewhere. I didn't say anything. So I don't know. It was probably round about the third day because, mind you, I had a cardiologist assigned to my case, a pulmonologist, and I had an infectious disease doctor, an ID doctor. I used to call them infectious disease doctors when I was a pharmaceutical sales rep. So I asked him, I said, exactly when were you going to tell me that I have a staph infection? Because I figured that's what I had. That's kind of pharmacy 101. When you learn about these medicines and you learn about these antibiotics, one of the most common infections that you can catch in a hospital, because all the germs are in a hospital, is a staph infection. And so I asked him. He was like, "Well, how did?" He said, "Well, who told you you had a staph infection?" I said, "Why are we having this discussion at my prompting?" I said, "Why wasn't I informed as a patient that I've contracted a staph infection in the hospital?" They didn't tell me. They didn't want to tell me. I knew it because they had hung a bag of antibiotic, and I'm looking at this thing, and I told him, I said, "Y'all gonna have to find a new place for this IV, because I believe this is probably how I contracted it with y'all sticking me." I probably had about, in total, in the 5 or 6 days I had been in the hospital at that point, I had probably been stuck at least 100 times. Between just trying to get blood, trying to find a viable vein for an IV, for intravenous use. So, about the third day on that antibiotic, I actually started to deteriorate and get worse, because now my body has a staph infection, which is a pretty nasty infection to have, but I have no defenses. I don't have an immune system to fight it off. But again, I don't know at this point that I have lupus, but I do know that my body, for all intents and purposes, is shot. Any defenses that I have is not there anymore. To make matters worse, I have all this fluid in my chest. I have fluid in my lungs. I have fluid around my heart. So, without people knowing anything about medicine, knowing anything about disease, what do you all think that bacteria, because staph is a bacteria, what do you all think that staph likes to do in all that fluid? So, the staph infection was just having a good old party. It was just having a real good time. And all that fluid around my heart. So now I have a bacterial infection inside of my heart sac and surrounding my heart. A staph infection, a bacterial infection. So the doctors were afraid that I was going to go septic. That's basically when the bacteria gets in your bloodstream. Um, it wasn't a hard leap or a guess to know that my condition was just getting worse and worse. And so, what I remember and what I recall is that basically the doctor had, the cardiothoracic surgeon had to stick, I don't know, it was probably an 18 or 20 gauge needle inside of my chest to withdraw that fluid, to see if it was still fluid, or to see if it was that bacteria, which basically looks like, for lack of a better term, green pus. And so now I'm going to take a drink. No judgment here, but if you choose to judge, I don't care anyway. So I don't remember that needle going in, but I certainly remember it coming out. And it was so thick and it was so full of pus that they were going to rush me to emergency surgery, because now I have infection all up and through my little heart sac. The bacteria is just doing a little dance, having a little party of their own, and being hot girls and boys of their own all up and through my heart. So the last thing I remember before I went unconscious is that the doctor basically said, we're not going to operate on her. We just have to see if she's still here later on. I was so unstable that the doctors basically reserved the right not to operate on you. They would have had to basically crack my chest, just like I was having a heart transplant or some type of bypass or heart surgery, in order to get to all of that infection in my heart. And basically, he made an executive decision that nope, we're not going to do that. I remember him being very angry that I became so unstable so quickly. And the last words that I remember is that he said, no, we are not going to operate on her. We just have to wait. And that's what I remember. So I don't know, about a day later, I remember waking up, and I remember that I was very sore, and I actually did have an incision in my chest. So while he did wait an amount of time, I don't know, it might have been 8 hours, it might have been 10 hours, he did not crack my chest, because he knew that I would not have survived it. Even though I was young and I had a young body, the condition of my immune system and just the condition that my body was in, it would not have survived it. So he explained to me exactly what he did to me. He cut probably about a 3-inch incision in the middle of my chest. And then and it did not require him to cut into the bone of my sternum. And I'm sure you've seen people after heart surgeries or after some type of bypass where they call what is called the zipper chest, because they've had to have their entire sternum cracked open. That's not what he did to me. He kind of cut a small incision, and what he explained to me is that he cut a square into my heart sac. So he removed a square, and he kind of sucked out and he kind of dug out as much of that infection as he possibly could. So he was trying to get to that infection and dig as much of that out as he possibly could without putting me through that kind of trauma, and that kind of surgery all at the same time. Now, mind you, let me back that up. So, prior to that, I actually had an aunt who had passed away, about 2 days prior. And my father was struggling, well, it was probably like 3 or 4 days prior. And my father was struggling as to whether or not he was going to leave me, and go out of town to Florida and bury his sister. And so, I wasn't declining at that point, and my dad made a decision to go and bury his sister. But when he came back to me, I was in poor condition. I was in worse condition than when he left. So, it was a lot going on. And obviously, when you tell stories like this, it's really not just my story, because not only was it impacting me, but obviously it was impacting all the people around me at the time. Obviously my family, my parents, my brothers, and anybody who was there and who cared about me. So, it was pretty, traumatic at the time. But I will tell you this, and I'm getting ready to, put a pin in it, and we'll pick it up tomorrow. After that, after I woke up, after I woke up from the first surgery, and I'm going to take a drink, I remember as that doctor was trying to explain to me what happened, I remember I cussed that man out and called him everything but a child of God. Because the last words that I remember was that he made a very conscious decision that he wasn't going to operate on me, and he reserves the right to do that. But at the end of the day, I know that he made the right decision and he saved my life. And I remember him telling my parents, now, mind you, I was grown. There were several times that I had to send my family out the room because I could do that. I sent my family home every night. The only time I wanted my parents there overnight with me was if I was having a surgery or some type of major procedure. But I remember him telling my parents, they said, Mr. and Mrs. Redfield, I can't talk to her if she's going to be abusive to me, because I don't know if my parents thought that I could cuss like that, but I'm telling you, I cussed that man from here till Tuesday because I was afraid and I was angry. I didn't know how we got from where I was to you cutting a hole in my chest and explaining to me that you have cut a hole in my heart sac. I wasn't even trying to hear any of that. It was just crazy. It was crazy, for me, and I just don't think that I had the emotional capacity, to handle that. And I was very angry with my doctor. And so, I had to kind of calm myself down and, pretty much listen to some things that he had to say to me, even though I didn't want to listen. So, tomorrow I am going to talk about, just kind of where I was, mentally, and emotionally, and just some of the disappointments that were coming my way, and how things did. Things got a lot worse before it got better. I'm at this point, I'm probably 9 days in the hospital. After I had that surgery, I had to go on the critical care unit. Most people who are on the critical care unit are not even conscious. It just depends upon what type of surgery you're having, you know. But I was very much conscious, very much awake, very much talkative, and I'm sure they wish that I was knocked out, but I wasn't. And I was angry and I was afraid. I have never been so afraid in my life. I was afraid, and I thought that the more informed I was, that I would be okay. I don't think I ever got to the point where I gave up, or I in my mind thought that I was going to die. But the doctor just kept telling my parents, and they would use these words. All of the doctors, they kept calling me a little girl. She's a very sick little girl. And they kept saying it over and over and over again. And I had all of these complications due to an infection, and they still hasn't haven't come with this whole lupus diagnosis. They still don't know what landed me in the hospital to begin with all of these issues. But now to boot, I have an infection to fight, and I have nothing to fight with because my immune system is completely shot. So, um, I'll just say to everybody that when it comes to anything in life, sometimes things have to get worse before it gets better. We all hear about hitting rock bottom when it comes to addiction, when it comes to many things in life, where people have to hit rock bottom, and that is it getting worse before you are actually able to heal and truly get better. And this was definitely a time for me, because if that's not enough, there were more things that happened. There was another heart surgery, there was a collapsed lung, and there was a whole host of other things that happened before I actually got better. So we'll talk about that tomorrow as I wrap this story up. I thank those who tuned in. And if you haven't watched the other three videos, please go back and watch them, and watch them in order so that it all kind of makes sense and it all kind of fits together. And thank you for listening. Again, I am recalling events from 23 years ago that I haven't talked about in years or at all to some people. So I really hope this helps someone and give them hope. I am here. I am healthy. I have had some amazing experience in life that I will wrap this up. While it may sound depressing and it may seem depressing, I was telling my friend earlier, oh my God, I think I've depressed myself telling my own story. But there is a but, there is a comma. It is not over. The story is not over. So thanks for listening, and I will see you all tomorrow, same time.